The calm before the storm. The Galactic Empire had enjoyed centuries of unchallenged rule. Its borders stretched across countless star systems, and its fleets were the largest and most advanced in the galaxy, or so they believed. On the surface, peace reigned. People went about their lives, trusting that the Emperor and his mighty forces would protect them from any threat. But peace, as history often taught, could be deceiving. On a quiet day in the capital planet, the Imperial Command Center buzzed with its usual hum of activity. Officers monitored star charts, technicians calibrated systems, and commanders discussed routine patrols. It was business as usual until a sudden alert broke the monotony. A junior officer's voice, shaky with urgency, echoed through the hall. The unidentified fleet detected in Sector 9. Approaching fast. At first, no one took it seriously. The Empire often encountered rogue traders or malfunctioning ships. Commander Velen, a young but respected officer, leaned over the radar display. His sharp eyes scanned the readings, but what he saw made his stomach churn. "Show me the details," Velen ordered, his voice firm but calm. The display lit up with data. The fleet was massive, larger than any rogue group could assemble, and it was moving at an impossible speed. Worse, the ships didn't match any known design in the Empire's records. For a moment, the command room fell silent as officers exchanged uneasy glances. "Who are they?" someone whispered. Velen straightened and turned to his team. "Send out a standard hail. Identify them, and demand their purpose in Imperial space." The communication team scrambled to comply, sending out the Empire's official greeting and warning. Seconds turned into minutes, and there was no response. Velen clenched his fists, his unease growing. A fleet this size couldn't simply wander into their space by accident. It was deliberate, calculated. "Commander," the junior officer spoke again, her voice trembling. "The fleet has changed course. They're heading directly for the capital." The words hung in the air like a dark cloud. Velen's mind raced. No fleet had ever dared to approach the capital unannounced. It was the heart of the Empire, heavily fortified, and protected by the largest battle stations in the galaxy. Yet this fleet showed no fear, no hesitation. "Alert the Emperor," Velen said, his tone sharper now. "And prepare the defensive fleet. If they don't respond, we'll stop them ourselves." As the command room erupted into action, Velen stared at the radar, his thoughts swirling. Who were these intruders? And why did they seem so confident? In the Emperor's grand palace, the news of the approaching fleet reached the throne room. Emperor Drennis, a proud and arrogant leader, dismissed the reports with a wave of his hand. "Humans," he scoffed. "A primitive species. They couldn't possibly pose a threat to us." The Emperor's advisors hesitated. "Your Majesty, their fleet's size and speed are unprecedented. Perhaps we should take precautions." "Nonsense," Drennis barked. "Send a warning. Tell them to turn back or face destruction. That should be enough to scare them off." The advisors reluctantly obeyed, but doubt lingered in their minds. Something about this felt different. Humans were supposed to be weak and insignificant, a forgotten species pushed to the edges of the galaxy. But if that were true, how had they built such a fleet? Back in the command center, Velen's team intercepted a chilling message. It was brief, only a few words, but it sent shivers down their spines. "We are here to reclaim what was stolen." The room fell silent. Velen replayed the message, trying to decipher its meaning. Stolen. What could they mean? The Empire's records held no mention of any conflict with humanity. Yet the tone of the message was clear. This fleet was on a mission, and they weren't turning back. "Commander, should we respond?" an officer asked hesitantly. Velen shook his head. "No. They've made their intentions clear. Prepare the fleet for interception. We need to stop them before they reach the capital." As the Imperial fleet mobilized, Velen couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far bigger than they understood. The humans weren't just coming. They were making the statement. and the Empire wasn't ready. The human fleet, sleek and dark, moved through space like a predator stalking its prey. Their ships were unlike anything the Empire had seen, sleek, agile, and brimming with unknown technology. On board the flagship, Admiral Ethan Drake watched the Imperial forces scramble with calm determination. "They think they're invincible," Drake said to his crew. "They think we're nothing. Let's show them how wrong they are." The human fleet continued its advance, ignoring warnings and blockade attempts. Each Imperial ship that stood in their way was swiftly neutralized, not destroyed, but rendered useless by strange energy pulses that shut down their systems. It was a show of power, a reminder that this wasn't an attack, but a reckoning. As the capital planet loomed in the distance, Drake sent out one final broadcast. His voice was calm, almost cold. "Stand down. We are not here to destroy, but we will if we must. Your time is up." The message reached Velan, who stood frozen in the command center. The weight of the moment pressed down on him. This wasn't just a fleet. It was a challenge to everything the Empire stood for. And the question lingered in his mind. What had the Empire done to bring this upon itself? The storm was coming, and the Empire wasn't ready. First contact. The Imperial fleet stretched across the stars like a wall of steel and firepower. Hundreds of battle cruisers, frigates, and fighter squadrons lined up in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming under the twin suns of the capital system. The Galactic Empire had mobilized its might, confident that no force in the galaxy could stand against them. But today felt different. Commander Velan stood on the bridge of the ISS Dominion, the Empire's largest dreadnought. His hands rested firmly behind his back, yet his fingers twitched with unease. He watched the massive viewscreen ahead as the unknown fleet drew closer. Each passing minute brought them deeper into Imperial space, violating every boundary. Velan had seen countless battles, but there was something unsettling about this silence. The human fleet didn't respond to warnings. They didn't slow down. There were no frantic diplomats begging for peace. It was as if they already knew the outcome. "Commander," the communications officer said, breaking the tense quiet. Still no response. "They've crossed the outer defense perimeter. Estimated arrival in 2 hours." Velan narrowed his eyes. "Has the Emperor responded to our request for guidance?" The officer hesitated. "No, sir. The Emperor believes we can handle this ourselves." Velan's jaw tightened. The Emperor's arrogance was dangerous, but it wasn't surprising. The Empire had crushed rebellions, pirate lords, and rival star nations for centuries. To the Emperor, humanity was a forgotten species with no real strength. But Velan had learned long ago, underestimating an opponent was the first step to losing. "Send out 2 Vanguard squadrons. I want them to intercept the lead ships. Do not fire unless provoked." The officers obeyed, and within minutes, the interceptors launched, their engines roaring into the void. Across the vast stretch of space, the human fleet loomed closer. Their ships moved in eerie synchrony, as if guided by a single mind. There were no elaborate formations or extravagant displays of power, just calm, steady advance. Velan watched closely as the 2 Vanguard squadrons approached the lead human ships. For a moment, hope flickered in his chest. If the humans stopped, maybe this could be settled peacefully. But then it happened. A flash of blue light erupted from the lead human vessel. Not a weapon, but an energy pulse that silently rippled across space. The Imperial interceptors shuddered mid-flight. And then, dead silence. The ships drifted lifelessly, engines flickering out. Communications cut off instantly. The interceptors weren't destroyed, but they were completely disabled. Velan's heart sank. He turned toward his officers, his voice sharper than before. "Status report. What happened to them?" The tech crew frantically scanned the readings. One officer, pale and sweating, spoke up. "Their systems were wiped, Commander. Navigation, weapons, engines. Everything's offline." Velan's pulse quickened. disabling an entire squadron without firing a single shot. No empire in the galaxy had such technology. Before he could process it further, the human fleet responded at last. A single, calm transmission echoed across the bridge. "You've had your warning. Stand down." Velen's blood chilled. The voice was clear, human, male, and utterly devoid of fear. "Commander," one of the junior officers stammered. "They just crossed the second defense line." Velen stepped forward, staring at the advancing fleet on the screen. "Are they making any demands?" The officer shook his head. "No demands, sir. They're just coming." Velen's knuckles turned white as he gripped the console. They weren't here to negotiate. Hours later, deep within the Imperial Palace, Emperor Draenus lounged on his grand throne, sipping rare celestial wine as his advisors argued among themselves. "They've breached 3 of our perimeters without firing a shot, Your Majesty," one advisor warned. "Their technology is advanced, far beyond what we anticipated." Draenus laughed. "Advanced? They haven't even scratched our hulls. I've read the reports. This is a bluff. They'd want us to panic." Another advisor stepped forward nervously. "But Your Majesty, if they reach the capital planet." "They won't." Draenus waved dismissively. "Dispatch the Dominion and her sister dreadnoughts. This human fleet will be a forgotten footnote by tomorrow." Despite his confidence, the room remained heavy with doubt. Back on the ISS Dominion, Velen stood silently, watching as the Empire's largest warships assembled in formation. The capital planet gleamed behind them, vulnerable but shielded by the pride of the Imperial fleet. "Sir," a lieutenant whispered, approaching him cautiously, "should we try communicating with the fleet again?" Velen's gaze didn't leave the screen. "They've made their message clear. They won't stop." He stared into the void, watching the human ships grow larger and larger. Something told him this was only the beginning. "Prepare all units for battle," Velen ordered softly. "But I have a feeling we're not ready for what's coming." The human revelation. The great warships of the Galactic Empire hung motionless in space, their hulking forms blocking the path to the capital planet. In the shadow of these mighty vessels, the human fleet drifted forward, calm and unhurried. Commander Velen stood at the command deck of the ISS Dominion, his sharp eyes fixed on the human ships that hovered at the edge of firing range. It had been hours since the first Imperial interceptors had fallen silent. No shots had been fired, no casualties reported. Yet, somehow, the humans had disabled an entire squadron without a trace of aggression. Velen's instincts screamed at him. This wasn't normal. A soft chime broke the silence. The communications officer turned, visibly nervous. "Commander, we're receiving a direct transmission from the lead human ship. It's visual." Velen straightened. "Put it through." The screen flickered to life. A figure appeared. A human man, draped in a dark military uniform with silver accents along the collar. His expression was cold but calm, and his piercing gaze seemed to lock with Velen's through the display. "This is Admiral Ethan Drake of the United Human Fleet." The man spoke evenly, his voice echoing across the Dominion's bridge. "I will speak only once." Velen's breath slowed. There was no arrogance in Drake's tone, only certainty. "You are trespassing in Imperial space," Velen replied firmly, though the weight in his chest grew heavier. "By order of the Emperor, you are commanded to turn back immediately." Admiral Drake's eyes narrowed slightly. "Your Emperor has no authority here." "Not anymore." A ripple of unease spread across the bridge. Velen glanced at his crew, noticing the tension in their faces. Velen's voice dropped. "Then why are you here?" Drake's answer came swiftly, without hesitation. "To reclaim what was stolen from us." Velen froze. Stolen? His brow furrowed. As far as he knew, humanity had no significant holdings within Imperial space. The humans were a fragmented species, living in scattered colonies on the outer rim. "You must be mistaken," Velen said carefully. "The Empire has no record of conflict with your people." Drake's lips curled into a faint smile, but it wasn't one of amusement. "Of course, you wouldn't," Drake replied. "Your empire buried the truth long ago. But we remember. Humanity remembers everything." Velan's heart thudded in his chest. Decades ago, humanity had been part of the Empire once, a fledgling race that had eagerly joined the galactic fold, contributing resources and technology. They had been valuable, innovative, and loyal. But the Empire feared them. Humans advanced too quickly, developing weapons and ships far beyond what the Imperial scientists anticipated. It wasn't long before whispers began, rumors of rebellion. Rather than risk open war, the Empire silently betrayed humanity. Entire human colonies were abandoned, left defenseless as Imperial forces withdrew their protection. Trade routes were severed, resources vanished. Pirates and alien warlords descended upon the human worlds like vultures. The Empire erased every trace of humanity's contributions, rewriting history to paint them as a weak, insignificant species. But humanity survived. In the shadows, they rebuilt, driven by rage and the memory of betrayal. Now, they had returned. Velan's mind spun as Drake's words sunk in. He wanted to dismiss it, call it propaganda or lies. But the calm certainty in Drake's voice made it hard to deny. If it was true, then the Empire had made a mistake that was finally coming back to haunt them. "Even if your claims are true," Velan said slowly, "this isn't the way to seek justice. Our Emperor will not respond to threats." Drake's gaze hardened. "You misunderstand, Commander," Drake replied. "We're not asking." A shiver ran down Velan's spine. "Within 24 hours, the capital will be under our control. Stand down, and no harm will come to your people. Resist, and your empire will burn." Velan's hands curled into fists. His crew looked at him for orders, waiting, silent and uncertain. Finally, Velan exhaled. "I need to speak to the Emperor." Imperial Palace. Throne Room. The transmission played across the grand display as Emperor Drennis watched in silence, his expression twisted in anger. "Lies," Drennis growled. "Nothing but lies from a bitter species." "Your Majesty," Velan's voice crackled through the palace speakers. "I recommend we negotiate. Their technology is beyond ours. If what Admiral Drake says is true, perhaps we can reach a peaceful." Drennis slammed his fist against the arm of his throne. "I will not kneel to humans," he spat. "Prepare the fleet for war. If they wish to test our strength, they will learn the true power of the Empire." The advisors around him exchanged nervous glances, but none dared to challenge the Emperor's decision. Velan's voice tightened. "Your Majesty, with all due respect." "Enough, Velan," Drennis cut him off. "You will lead the counterattack personally." Velan's heart sank. The Empire's pride was blinding them, dragging them toward a war they might not survive. As the transmission ended, Velan's gaze drifted to the stars. The human fleet was still there, waiting. And for the first time in his career, Velan wondered if the Empire's time was coming to an end. The Great Divide. The grand halls of the Imperial Palace felt colder than usual. The towering marble columns, gilded in gold, shimmered under the artificial light, but the air carried a weight that no decoration could lift. Whispers echoed through the corridors, spreading like wildfire among ministers, officers, and civilians alike. The humans were here. Commander Velan's boots struck the polished floor with purpose as he strode through the palace toward the council chamber. His thoughts raced with the memory of Admiral Drake's calm voice and the chilling message that followed. "The capital will be under our control in 24 hours. Velan could still feel the tension on the bridge of the Dominion as he replayed the transmission in his mind. The human fleet hadn't advanced further, but they hadn't retreated either. They hovered at the edge of the capital system, close enough to strike, yet still holding back. Why wait? That question gnawed at Velan, but there was something far more troubling: the Emperor's arrogance. As Velan approached the council doors, 2 Imperial guards stepped aside, their faces rigid with unease. They had heard the rumors too. Everyone had. The doors opened to reveal the Emperor, seated high on his throne, while his most trusted advisors huddled below, their voices hushed but urgent. "Commander Villon." The Emperor's booming voice filled the chamber as Villon entered. "You return from the front. What news do you bring?" Villon bowed respectfully, but wasted no time. "Your Majesty, the human fleet remains in position, but they have issued a warning. They claim to seek justice for past betrayals, and they will not leave until their demands are met." The Emperor's eyes narrowed, his lip curling in disdain. "Demands," Drenus scoffed. "Typical human arrogance. They are bluffing." Villon's gaze flickered toward the advisors, catching the nervous shifting in their seats. Even they didn't seem convinced. "With respect, Your Majesty," Villon began cautiously, "their technology outmatches ours. They disabled an entire squadron without firing a single shot. If they were bluffing, they wouldn't have reached the capital so easily." Drenus leaned forward, his glare sharp as a blade. "Are you suggesting the Empire bends to the will of these pests?" Villon hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I'm suggesting, Your Majesty, that we consider the possibility that humanity is not the weak, forgotten race we believe them to be." Silence filled the room. It was a dangerous thing to say, but Villon could feel the eyes of the council upon him. Some of them agreed, even if they dared not voice it aloud. "They will not harm the capital if we stand down," Villon continued, softening his tone. "They seek acknowledgement, not war." Admiral Drake's words were clear. Drenus stood abruptly, his golden robe sweeping across the steps of the throne. "I will not show weakness to the galaxy. If we yield, every species under our rule will rise against us. The humans will burn, Villon. Mark my words." Villon's fists tightened at his sides, but he held his tongue. The council chamber felt suffocating, the divide growing deeper between those who saw reason and those who clung to pride. Later that evening, among the people, Villon left the palace, seeking clarity in the streets below. The capital city stretched endlessly, glittering towers reflecting the faint glow of the human fleet lingering in the distant sky. People gathered in crowds, their eyes fixated upward, whispering among themselves. A soft voice broke through the murmurs. "Commander Villon." Villon turned to find an older woman standing nearby, her face lined with age, but her eyes sharp with recognition. She wasn't a noble or military officer, just a citizen. "You've seen them, haven't you?" she asked quietly. Villon nodded. "They're not like the stories," the woman continued. "They don't come to conquer. They come to remind us." Villon studied her carefully. "Remind us of what?" The woman's gaze didn't waver. "That the Empire was built on lies." A chill ran down Villon's spine. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice cautious. The woman gave a faint smile. "Someone who remembers." Before he could press further, she disappeared into the crowd, leaving Villon standing alone beneath the cold glow of the stars. The next morning, Imperial Command Center. Villon stood at his station aboard the Dominion as the sun crested the horizon of the capital planet. Reports streamed in from across the Empire. Disturbances, protests, whispers of rebellion. The human fleet's arrival hadn't just disrupted the military. It had shaken the very foundations of the Empire itself. "Sir," an officer called out. "The human fleet, it's moved closer." Villon's eyes snapped to the view screen. The human ships now hovered dangerously near the orbital defense platforms. A single message appeared on the screen, addressed to the Emperor. "This is your final warning." Villon exhaled slowly, knowing exactly what was coming next. The divide between the Emperor and his people had grown too wide to mend. The question now was simple. Which side would Villon choose? Humanity's true strength. The Imperial War Room was silent, save for the faint hum of holographic star maps flickering across the massive central table. High-ranking officers and ministers stood like statues, their eyes fixed on the slow but steady advance of the human fleet. Commander Villon stood at the far end, arms crossed as he observed the formations. Something about the way the human ships moved gnawed at him. There was no hesitation, no unnecessary maneuvering. Every ship had a purpose, every formation a strategy. They're within firing range of the orbital defense stations, Admiral Karras muttered, his voice tight with frustration. Why aren't they attacking? Villan glanced at him. Because they don't need to. The Admiral's gaze snapped toward Villan, his brow furrowing. They're not here for war, Villan continued. At least, not the kind you're expecting. The Emperor's voice cut through the room, cold and sharp. If they're not here for war, why do they continue to press forward? Drennis's golden cloak flowed behind him as he stepped closer to the display. His eyes narrowed as he pointed at the human ships. They could have stopped at the outer rim. They could have negotiated. Instead, they've marched right to our doorstep. Villan met the Emperor's gaze, his tone calm but firm. Because, Your Majesty, they know something we don't. The Emperor's eyes darkened. You're suggesting that humans have developed technology beyond our understanding. Drennis scoffed. Impossible. The Empire holds the most advanced fleets in the galaxy. Villan hesitated. He could feel the weight of every officer's gaze on him, but the moment of hesitation passed. It was time to speak the truth. With all due respect, Your Majesty, the evidence is right in front of us. They've crossed 3 defense lines without losing a single ship. Our interceptors were disabled by an energy pulse we can't explain. Every weapon we aim at them fails before we can fire. The room fell into a thick silence. Finally, Admiral Karras spoke, his voice low. So what do you propose, Villan? Surrender? Villan straightened. I propose we ask ourselves a question no one here wants to ask. He took a step toward the hologram, eyes scanning the formations of the human fleet. What if the Empire isn't the most powerful force in the galaxy anymore? The air seemed to grow heavier. Above the capital planet, Imperial Defense Grid. The orbital defense platforms locked onto the lead human vessels, massive cannons glowing with energy as they prepared to fire. Rows of missile batteries hummed in readiness, their targeting systems fixed on the approaching ships. Defense Grid at full charge. A voice crackled over the command channels, awaiting orders to fire. On board the Dominion, Villan watched as the countdown began. Commander, the weapons officer reported, the Emperor has issued the final order. If they breach the planetary defense line, we're to unleash the full fleet. Villan's stomach twisted. They're forcing us to attack, Villan murmured under his breath. Even if it leads to our destruction. Seconds ticked by. The human fleet showed no sign of slowing. And then, the defense grid blinked offline. One by one, the glowing platforms darkened. Cannons powered down. Missile arrays froze mid-activation. Gasps rippled across the bridge. Report, Villan demanded, striding to the command console. The technician frantically scanned his screen, sweat forming on his brow. Sir, all systems have been overridden. Villan's eyes narrowed. By who? The technician swallowed hard. By them. Villan's breath caught. The human fleet hadn't fired a single shot. They had simply taken control. On board the human flagship, Admiral Ethan Drake watched as the Imperial defenses crumbled without resistance. Around him, his crew remained silent, efficient in their work. Report, Drake commanded. A young officer glanced up from his console. The planetary defenses are fully neutralized. Admiral, their fleet is immobilized. Drake nodded. Good. He leaned back in his chair, gazing out of the panoramic window at the distant capital planet. They still don't understand, Drake muttered softly. A second officer turned toward him. Should we proceed with the next phase? Drake's eyes remained locked on the distant Imperial ships. No, let them watch a little longer. Fear of the unknown will break them faster than any weapon ever could. On the ISS Dominion, Villan stood frozen, eyes fixed on the view screen. His fleet, the pride of the Empire, sat powerless, adrift in the void. What have they done to us? An officer whispered, Velon exhaled slowly. "They've evolved," Velon replied. "While we stood still, they advanced beyond us." The room grew quiet as realization sank in. In the capital city, Imperial Palace, the Emperor's throne room trembled with rage as Draenus clamped his fists against the armrests. "Explain this," Draenus roared at his advisors. "How can an entire fleet be reduced to nothing without a single shot fired?" No one answered. Finally, one of the older ministers, his voice soft but steady, spoke. "Your Majesty, perhaps the Empire's era of dominance has come to an end." Draenus's eyes blazed with fury, but deep within them, a flicker of doubt lingered. The truth was undeniable. The Empire wasn't just facing an enemy fleet. They were facing the future, the fall of an empire. The skies above the capital planet darkened, not from weapons fire or destruction, but from the sheer presence of the human fleet. The once proud Galactic Empire, which had stretched its dominion across countless systems, now found itself trapped, its warships drifting helplessly, its mighty defenses reduced to silence. From the observation deck of the ISS Dominion, Commander Velon watched as the lead human ship hovered just beyond the atmosphere. Its sleek, obsidian hull gleamed faintly in the pale light of the twin suns. It was close enough that Velon could see the faint shimmer of energy pulsing beneath the surface, like a heart beating beneath armor. "Commander," the communications officer said, his voice hollow with disbelief. "We've received another transmission from Admiral Drake." Velon turned slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. "Play it." The bridge lights dimmed as the screen flickered to life. Admiral Drake's figure appeared, standing tall with the calm confidence of a man who had already won. His eyes narrowed slightly as he spoke, his tone steady but devoid of malice. "The Empire has fallen, Commander Velon. There's no need for further resistance. Lower your fleet's weapons, and we will allow your ships to withdraw peacefully." Velon's eyes didn't waver from the screen. He could feel the weight of his crew's gaze upon him, silently waiting for his decision. The proud soldiers who once believed in the invincibility of the Empire now stood in the shadow of something far greater and far more patient. "What happens if we refuse?" Velon asked, his voice calm but firm. Drake's expression hardened. "Then you will share the fate of your Emperor." A cold shiver ran down Velon's spine. He took a step closer to the screen. "What are your intentions, Admiral? You could have destroyed us days ago. Why hold back?" Drake's eyes softened, if only slightly. "This isn't about destruction, Commander. Humanity doesn't want to rule the galaxy through fear. We came to show the Empire that power built on deception and cruelty cannot stand forever." Velon remained silent for a long moment. He could feel the truth behind Drake's words. The Empire's power had been a lie, a hollow shell propped up by stories of invincibility. And now those stories had unraveled. In the Imperial Palace, Emperor Draenus stood alone in his throne room, the shadows of towering marble columns stretching long across the floor as the sun set behind the distant mountains. He watched the human fleet through the massive glass windows, his expression unreadable. The advisors, officers, and nobles had fled, many abandoning the palace as whispers of surrender grew louder. Some had left the capital altogether, disappearing into the distant colonies to escape the inevitable fallout. But Draenus remained. His golden robes, symbols of an empire that had ruled for centuries, now felt heavier than ever. A faint chime echoed through the chamber, and a hologram flickered to life before him. Admiral Drake's image appeared, standing tall and calm. "Your Majesty," Drake began, his voice respectful but firm. "The time has come. Surrender the capital, and we will ensure the safety of your people." Draenus's eyes narrowed. "You expect me to kneel?" Drake's gaze didn't waver. "No," he replied. "I expect you to face the truth. Your empire's time has passed." The words lingered, echoing through the empty hall. For the first time in his reign, Draenus felt small, like a relic of another age. His hands trembled slightly as he stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon, where human ships cast shadows across the world he once ruled. The Empire was falling, but perhaps in its place, something new could rise. Hours later, Imperial Command. Valen stood at the head of the Imperial fleet, his gaze fixed on the screen as the human ships slowly withdrew from orbit. The Empire's surrender had been accepted. The once mighty warships that guarded the capital were now standing down, drifting into formation as they prepared to escort the remaining Imperial vessels back to their ports. "Commander," the navigation officer called softly, "Admiral Drake is requesting to meet with you in person." Valen raised an eyebrow. "In person?" "Yes, sir. He's already entered the atmosphere. His shuttle will arrive shortly." Valen exhaled, adjusting the collar of his uniform. "Prepare the landing bay," he ordered. Minutes later, Valen stood on the docking platform as the sleek, black shuttle descended. The landing struts hissed softly as they touched down, and the ramp lowered with a quiet hum. Admiral Drake stepped down the ramp, his hands resting behind his back as he approached. Valen met him halfway. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Finally, Valen extended his hand. "I don't understand everything that's happened," Valen admitted. "But I know one thing. The Empire will never be the same." Drake took Valen's hand, shaking it firmly. "It's not the end, Commander, just the beginning of something better." As the two men stood side by side, the sun rose slowly behind them, casting light over a galaxy that, for the first time in centuries, no longer belonged to the Empire. It belonged to those who had endured. And humanity had endured. A new dawn. The sun crept over the jagged skyline of the Imperial capital, casting long rays of light that pierced through the towering spires and empty streets. The flags of the Galactic Empire, once a symbol of fear and absolute authority, hung limp and forgotten over the marble pillars of the central plaza. For the first time in centuries, there was no imperial parade, no military march, and no blaring horns to greet the new day. Instead, there was silence. Commander Valen stood atop the balcony of the Imperial Palace, his gaze fixed on the sprawling city below. The air felt different, lighter, but fragile, like glass that had not yet shattered. The human fleet had withdrawn just hours ago, but their presence still lingered, etched into the memories of those who witnessed the events unfold. Behind him, the grand throne room stood empty. The Emperor's ornate chair remained, but Drinnis was gone. Valen turned away from the cityscape, stepping back into the chamber where Imperial banners fluttered gently in the soft breeze. The golden throne, once a seat of unchecked power, now felt more like a relic than a crown jewel. The Empire had fallen, but humanity had not taken the throne by force. They had left it behind. Across the capital city, the people emerged slowly from their homes and shelters. For days, they had waited, uncertain of what would happen next. Rumors of the Empire's surrender had spread like wildfire, but no official word had been issued. In the crowded market square, a small child tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Is it over?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She knelt beside him, brushing a lock of hair from his face. "I think it is," she replied softly, gazing up at the sky where the human ships had once hovered. As if on cue, the large holoscreens scattered throughout the city flickered to life. A symbol appeared, a simple crest of a rising sun, unfamiliar but comforting. Then, Admiral Drake's image filled the screen. "To the people of the Empire," Drake began, his voice calm and measured. "I speak to you not as a conqueror, but as someone who believes in a future beyond war and oppression. Your leaders sought to erase the truth, but the truth has found its way home." The crowd gathered in silence, hanging on his every word. "The Empire's reign has ended, but your place in the galaxy has not," Drake continued. "Humanity does not seek to rule you. We came to remind you that no empire stands forever. What survives is the will of its people." The screen shifted to show footage from across the galaxy. Imperial outposts where soldiers lowered their weapons, colonies where human ships arrived not with war, but with aid. "You have a choice," Drake said. "Rebuild, not as subjects, but as free citizens. We will stand with you, but the path forward is yours to walk." The screen flickered off, leaving only the hum of the city in its wake. For the first time in years, people felt something foreign. Hope. Imperial Palace. Hours later, Velon watched from the palace steps as delegations from across the Empire arrived, their banners no longer bearing the imperial sigil. One by one, planetary governors and leaders stepped forward, not to swear allegiance to a new ruler, but to sit together at a round table within the palace hall. Commander Velon. Velon turned to see Admiral Drake approaching from the far end of the chamber, his hands resting behind his back. "You stayed," Drake observed, nodding toward the empty throne. Velon smiled faintly. "Somebody has to make sure the Empire doesn't fall into the wrong hands again." Drake raised an eyebrow. "And whose hands are the right ones?" Velon glanced toward the round table, where leaders from countless worlds now spoke as equals. "Not one," Velon replied, "but many." Drake's expression softened, and he extended his hand. Velon took it firmly. "You'll make a fine leader, Velon," Drake said. "I'm not interested in leading," Velon replied with a slight grin. "Just making sure no one forgets what happened here." Drake nodded knowingly. "History is a fragile thing," he said, "but those who remember shape the future." As Drake turned to leave, Velon looked back at the round table, at the people ready to forge a new path. The Empire was gone, but in its place, something far greater was beginning to rise. And this time, it would belong to everyone.